My beloved brothers and sisters, Islam teaches us kindness, mercy, and patience, but it does not teach us to accept disrespect. Many people stay silent in pain because the disrespect comes from family and they believe enduring humiliation is a form of righteousness. But there is a clear difference between patience and self-destruction. Allah never asks you to break your heart to keep others comfortable. Respect is a basic right, not a reward for obedience. When words hurt your dignity, when behavior crushes your spirit, and when boundaries are constantly ignored, silence is no longer wisdom, it becomes harm. Honoring family does not mean tolerating abuse. Protecting your peace is not disobedience. And setting boundaries is not arrogance. Islam calls us to be gentle, but also to be firm when dignity is threatened. If you want, I'll continue with the key lessons next. Respect is a right, not something you have to earn. Allah created every human being with honor and dignity. This honor is not something people must beg for, negotiate, or earn through obedience or silence. It is a right given by Allah Himself. When Islam speaks about respect, it speaks from this foundation. Your worth does not increase because someone approves of you, and it does not decrease because someone disrespects you. Many believers suffer quietly because they think enduring disrespect is humility. But humility before Allah does not mean humiliation before people. Allah never commands you to accept being belittled, insulted, or emotionally crushed. Respect is not a privilege granted by others. It is a boundary Allah placed around your soul. When that boundary is crossed repeatedly, it is not patience to stay silent, it is harm. Understanding this truth brings clarity to the heart and removes unnecessary guilt that people often carry. Too many people confuse respect with approval. They believe they must constantly prove themselves worthy of basic decency. This thinking exhausts the heart. Islam teaches that respect is the starting point of human interaction, not the reward at the end of obedience. You do not need to earn the right to be spoken to kindly. You do not need to earn the right to be treated with dignity. These are given by Allah, not controlled by people. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, the problem is not your failure, it is their behavior. Accepting disrespect does not make you righteous. It slowly damages your self-worth and clouds your understanding of faith. Allah wants your heart strong, not broken. Knowing that respect is your right allows you to stand firm without arrogance and protect yourself without guilt. The Prophet ﷺ treated people with respect regardless of their status, background, or mistakes. This shows us that respect is not conditional. It is not something reserved for the perfect or obedient. Even when correcting others, the Prophet ﷺ maintained dignity in his speech. This prophetic example teaches us that Islam does not endorse harshness or humiliation as tools for guidance. If correction itself must be respectful, then how can constant disrespect ever be justified? Those who use religion to excuse cruelty misunderstand the message. Islam uplifts, it does not degrade. When you understand this, you stop tolerating treatment that contradicts the mercy and honor Allah placed within you. Respect being a right also means you are not required to shrink yourself to keep others comfortable. Some people only feel satisfied when you remain silent, obedient, and emotionally small. But Islam does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to be sincere, balanced, and dignified. You can disagree respectfully. You can say no calmly. You can set limits without hatred. All of this flows naturally when you understand that respect is not something you earn through suffering. It is something you uphold through wisdom. Many believers fear that asserting their right to respect is arrogance, but arrogance comes from pride, not self-respect. Standing against disrespect does not mean you think you are better than others. It means you recognize the value Allah placed within you. There is a difference between humility and self-erasure. Humility lowers the ego before Allah. Self-erasure allows others to destroy your emotional well-being. Islam calls for the first and protects you from the second. When respect is constantly violated, the heart begins to harden, resentment grows, faith becomes heavy. This is why Allah does not want believers to live under continuous humiliation. But protecting dignity preserves the heart's softness. It allows you to remain kind without becoming bitter. That balance is essential for spiritual health. Respect safeguards your iman. Some people misuse the concept of sabr to demand silence in the face of harm. But patience does not mean accepting injustice. Patience means responding wisely without sin. Sometimes the wise response is distance. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a clear boundary. All of these can exist within sabr. Accepting disrespect repeatedly is not patience. It is neglect of the self Allah entrusted to you. When you internalize that respect is your right, your reactions change. You stop arguing, you stop over-explaining, you stop chasing validation. Calm firmness replaces emotional exhaustion. This calmness is powerful. It reflects trust in Allah rather than fear of people. People may resist your boundaries, but your peace will increase. Respect also teaches others how to treat you. When you tolerate disrespect, you silently teach people that it is acceptable. When you uphold dignity, you set a standard. This standard does not need to be loud or aggressive. It only needs to be consistent. Consistency speaks clearly. Islam never teaches believers to live in fear of relationships. Family, community, and society are meant to be spaces of mercy, not constant emotional injury. When these spaces become harmful, Islam allows protection. Respect is the minimum requirement for healthy interaction. Without it, no relationship can thrive. Understanding this truth frees many hearts. You no longer feel guilty for protecting yourself. You no longer confuse suffering with righteousness. You begin to walk with balance. Balance is beloved to Allah. Respect is also closely tied to accountability. When people know you value your dignity, they become more careful with their words and actions. This does not create distance, it creates healthier relationships. Clear boundaries reduce conflict more than silent endurance ever will. Your worth is not determined by how much disrespect you can endure. It is determined by your sincerity, your faith, and your character. Allah looks at the heart, not how much humiliation it tolerated. This understanding restores strength to wounded souls. When respect is honored, peace follows. The heart feels safe. Faith feels lighter. Relationships become clearer. This peace is not selfish. It is necessary. Allah does not want His servants broken. In the end, respect is a right because Allah gave it to you. You do not earn it through pain, silence, or obedience. You protect it through wisdom, faith, and trust in Allah. And when you honor the dignity Allah placed within you, you walk with strength He Himself supports. Patience does not mean accepting humiliation. Patience is one of the most misunderstood qualities in Islam. Many people think sabr means staying silent while being mistreated, insulted, or emotionally crushed. But Allah never commanded patience at the cost of dignity. Patience is about controlling your reaction, not surrendering your worth. It is the ability to remain calm, faithful, and principled while choosing the response that protects your soul. Accepting humiliation repeatedly does not strengthen iman. It slowly weakens the heart. Allah honors the believer and does not expect them to live broken under the weight of disrespect. True patience is strength with restraint, not weakness with silence. When the believer understands this, guilt disappears. You realize that standing firm is not rebellion, and walking away from humiliation is not disobedience. It is self-preservation guided by faith. Allah sees the intention behind patience and He rewards the believer who chooses wisdom over self-destruction. Humiliation damages the heart in ways people often ignore. When someone is constantly belittled, mocked, or dismissed, the soul begins to shrink, confidence fades, faith feels heavy. Over time, resentment builds and bitterness enters worship itself. Allah does not want His servants to reach Him with wounded hearts. Patience was never meant to turn believers into emotional victims. It was meant to help them rise above hardship with dignity intact. Islam teaches balance. Just as the body has rights, the soul has rights. Allowing humiliation to continue unchecked violates those rights. Recognizing this is not arrogance, it is awareness. The believer who understands sabr correctly does not confuse endurance with self-harm. The Prophet ﷺ was the most patient of all people, yet he never accepted humiliation as a permanent state. When insulted, he chose wisdom. When harm became persistent, he took action with dignity. His patience was purposeful, not passive. He taught us that sabr includes setting limits when harm crosses into injustice. Patience means choosing the right response at the right time, not remaining silent while being destroyed. This prophetic example corrects a dangerous misunderstanding. Silence is not always sabr. Sometimes sabr is walking away. Sometimes it is speaking calmly. Sometimes it is creating distance. All of these can be acts of patience when done for the sake of Allah. Many people misuse religion to demand silence from others. They tell the wounded to be patient while continuing harmful behavior. This is not Islamic teaching, it is manipulation. Allah does not support oppression in any form. He is just and He loves justice. Patience does not mean enabling wrongdoing. It means responding without sin while refusing to let injustice define your life. When believers accept humiliation in the name of patience, they often lose clarity about Allah's mercy. Islam never asks you to carry pain endlessly to prove faith. Allah is gentle and He wants gentleness for His servants. Patience also includes protecting your mental and emotional health. Islam values well-being. A believer who is constantly humiliated struggles to worship with focus and sincerity. The heart becomes distracted by pain. Protecting yourself restores balance. When balance returns, faith strengthens. This is why patience cannot be separated from wisdom. Wisdom knows when endurance heals and when endurance harms. The believer seeks Allah's guidance to know the difference. Accepting humiliation teaches people that disrespect has no consequences. This does not bring peace. It invites further harm. Setting boundaries does not contradict patience. It supports it. Boundaries allow patience to function without destroying the soul. They create space for healing rather than resentment. The believer who sets boundaries with calmness is practicing sabr with intelligence. Patience does not erase your voice. It refines it. You may choose silence not out of fear but out of strength, or you may choose speech not out of anger but out of clarity. Both can be patience. The intention matters. Allah looks at the heart, not the noise. Some believers fear that protecting themselves will anger Allah, but Allah is closer to the broken-hearted than to those who cause harm. He does not side with humiliation, He sides with justice. When you step away from harm with trust in Allah, He replaces what you lost with peace. That peace is a sign of correct patience. True sabr builds strength. It does not leave scars that never heal. It increases reliance on Allah, not fear of people. When patience is practiced correctly, the believer becomes calmer, wiser, and more resilient. Humiliation does the opposite. It drains faith. Allah never commands what weakens iman. Patience also teaches accountability. It allows the believer to forgive without allowing repeated harm. Forgiveness and tolerance are noble, but they are not tools for self-destruction. Islam allows mercy with boundaries. This balance protects the heart. When patience is misunderstood, believers suffer silently and unnecessarily. When patience is understood correctly, believers heal. They grow, they rise. Allah wants elevation, not erosion. Sabr is a leather, not a cave. Every time a believer chooses dignity with patience, Allah elevates them. He sees the restraint, He sees the pain, He sees the trust, and He rewards it in ways people never could. This is the promise of Allah. Patience does not mean staying where you are being broken. It means leaving without hatred, responding without sin, and trusting Allah with the outcome. This patience is powerful. It restores the soul. In the end, patience does not mean accepting humiliation. It means choosing faith, dignity, and wisdom over suffering that Allah never asked you to endure. And when patience is practiced this way, it becomes a source of strength, peace, and divine support. Islam commands kindness, but also self-dignity. Islam is a religion of mercy, compassion, and kindness, but it is also a religion that protects dignity. Many believers emphasize kindness so strongly that they forget Allah also commands honor and self-respect. Being gentle does not mean allowing yourself to be crushed. Being forgiving does not mean permitting repeated harm. Allah created the believer with dignity, and that dignity is sacred. Kindness in Islam is meant to soften hearts, not to erase the self. When kindness turns into self-neglect, it loses its balance. Islam never teaches believers to abandon themselves to prove faith. True kindness flows from strength, not weakness. It is a choice made with awareness, not fear. When the believer understands this balance, their faith becomes healthier and their heart becomes steadier. They learn that kindness and dignity are not opposites, but partners that protect the soul. The Prophet ﷺ embodied this balance perfectly. He was gentle in speech, patient in behavior, and merciful in judgment, yet he never allowed his dignity to be violated. When boundaries were crossed, he responded with clarity and firmness. This teaches us that kindness without dignity becomes vulnerability, while dignity without kindness becomes harshness. Islam rejects both extremes. The believer is taught to be compassionate without becoming a target and firm without becoming cruel. This balance preserves relationships while protecting the heart. When kindness is grounded in self-respect, it becomes sustainable. It does not lead to burnout, resentment, or emotional exhaustion. It leads to peace. Many people confuse kindness with silence in the face of harm. They believe that remaining quiet while being disrespected is virtuous. But Islam does not praise silence that enables injustice. Allah is gentle, but He is also just. He does not expect His servants to tolerate what destroys them. Kindness must never require the sacrifice of dignity. When a believer speaks calmly against disrespect, they are not abandoning kindness, they are honoring it. Because true kindness includes being honest about harm and preventing its continuation. Self-dignity protects the heart from bitterness. When people repeatedly accept disrespect in the name of kindness, resentment quietly grows. That resentment eventually poisons relationships and worship. Islam wants the heart clean, not silently wounded. By upholding dignity, the believer prevents long-term harm. They remain capable of kindness because they are not emotionally depleted. This is why dignity is not selfish. It is protective. It allows kindness to remain sincere rather than forced. Kindness guided by dignity also teaches others how to behave. When boundaries are clear, respect increases. People are less likely to cross lines when they know those lines exist. This creates healthier relationships. Islam values harmony, but harmony cannot exist where one person is constantly diminished. Dignity restores balance. It allows kindness to be mutual rather than one-sided. Mutual kindness strengthens families and communities. Islam also commands believers to speak with wisdom. Wisdom includes knowing when kindness should be expressed through patience and when it should be expressed through firmness. Both are acts of faith. The believer who remains calm while setting boundaries is practicing Islam correctly. They are not reacting with anger, nor submitting to harm. They are choosing the middle path that Allah loves. Some fear that maintaining dignity will distance people, but relationships built on disrespect are already unhealthy. Islam prioritizes quality of character over quantity of connections. A believer may lose approval when they assert dignity, but they gain peace. And peace rooted in faith is more valuable than acceptance rooted in fear. Allah replaces what is lost for His sake with something better. Kindness without dignity often leads to manipulation. Some people take advantage of gentle hearts, using religion as an excuse to demand tolerance. Islam does not support this misuse. The Prophet ﷺ warned against oppression in all forms. Allowing oneself to be consistently mistreated is not righteousness. Protecting dignity prevents exploitation and preserves justice. Self-dignity also strengthens faith. When the believer honors the worth Allah gave them, their confidence in Allah grows. They stop seeking validation from people and start trusting divine guidance. This trust stabilizes the heart. A stable heart can be kind without fear. Fearless kindness is powerful. Islam encourages believers to forgive, but forgiveness does not erase boundaries. Forgiveness cleanses the heart, while boundaries protect it. Both are necessary. Without boundaries, forgiveness becomes permission. With boundaries, forgiveness becomes healing. This distinction is essential for spiritual health. Kindness with dignity allows the believer to walk away without hatred. They do not seek revenge. They do not argue endlessly. They choose distance with calmness. This restraint reflects maturity in faith. Allah loves those who act with balance. When dignity is honored, kindness becomes intentional. Words are chosen carefully. Actions are guided by sincerity. The believer no longer feels trapped between faith and self-respect. They realize Islam supports both. The believer who understands this balance becomes emotionally strong. They are gentle yet not fragile, patient yet not passive, compassionate yet not compromised. The strength is rooted in faith. Islam commands kindness so hearts may soften, but it commands dignity so souls are not destroyed. Both commands exist together. Removing one damages the other. In the end, kindness guided by self-dignity reflects true Islamic character. It protects the heart, preserves faith, and aligns the believer with the mercy and justice of Allah at the same time. Setting boundaries is not disobedience. Many believers struggle with the idea of setting boundaries because they fear it may be seen as disobedience, especially within family relationships. But Islam never commands a person to erase themselves to prove loyalty. Boundaries are not walls of arrogance. They are lines of protection drawn with wisdom. Allah created you with dignity, and preserving that dignity is part of faith. When you set a boundary, you are not rejecting people, you are protecting your heart from harm. Disobedience is defying Allah, not safeguarding your well-being. Islam encourages balance, and balance requires limits. Without boundaries, kindness turns into exhaustion and patience turns into pain. Allah does not want His servants living in constant emotional injury. He wants hearts that are strong, calm, and connected to Him. Setting boundaries allows the believer to remain respectful without being repeatedly wounded. This is not rebellion, it is responsibility. The Prophet ﷺ himself set boundaries with wisdom and clarity. He was gentle, but he was never passive in the face of harm. When behavior crossed limits, he addressed it calmly and decisively. This teaches us that boundaries are part of prophetic character. Islam does not promote blind endurance. It promotes thoughtful restraint. A believer who sets boundaries is not breaking ties. They are redefining interaction in a healthier way. Allah values relationships built on mercy and respect, not fear and emotional pressure. When a boundary prevents harm, it becomes an act of faith. It protects the heart from resentment and preserves the ability to remain kind. Without boundaries, even good intentions can turn into bitterness. Many people confuse obedience with silence. They believe that saying nothing, no matter the cost, is righteousness. But obedience to Allah never includes self-destruction. Islam commands kindness to parents and relatives, but it does not command enduring constant emotional harm. Boundaries do not cancel kindness, they organize it. You can still speak respectfully while refusing abuse. You can still show care while protecting your peace. This balance is Islamic. Allah does not ask you to suffer endlessly to prove faith. He asks you to act with wisdom. Wisdom knows when closeness heals and when distance protects. Setting boundaries also prevents long-term damage to relationships. When disrespect goes unchecked, resentment grows quietly. Eventually, the relationship collapses under the weight of unspoken pain. Boundaries stop this cycle early. They bring clarity instead of confusion. When expectations are clear, interactions improve. Islam values clarity. It prevents dhulm, injustice, from taking root. A believer who sets boundaries early saves themselves and others from future harm. This is not selfishness, it is foresight. Some fear that boundaries will be misunderstood. They worry people will accuse them of arrogance or ingratitude, but Allah knows intention. When your boundary is set calmly, without insult or hatred, Allah sees it as wisdom. People may react emotionally, but emotions do not define truth. The believer prioritizes Allah's pleasure over people's comfort. If a boundary protects your iman and mental well-being, it is not disobedience. It is obedience to the trust Allah placed within you. Boundaries also teach self-respect. When you honor yourself, you honor the Creator who made you. Islam does not support a believer living without value. The Prophet ﷺ said the believer is strong. Strength includes knowing when to say enough. This strength is quiet, not aggressive. It does not seek conflict. It seeks stability. Boundaries give stability to the heart. They stop emotional bleeding and allow healing to begin. Setting boundaries does not mean cutting ties. Islam discourages severing relationships without cause. Boundaries are not severance, they are structure. They define how connection continues without harm. Distance can exist with respect. Silence can exist with kindness. Allah understands complexity. He does not force believers into emotional traps disguised as obedience. Many believers feel guilty when they protect themselves. That guilt often comes from misunderstanding faith. Islam does not want guilt to be the foundation of relationships. It wants sincerity and peace. When you act with sincerity, Allah replaces guilt with clarity. Clarity strengthens faith. Boundaries also help believers remain consistent in character. Without them, emotions swing between anger and suppression. With boundaries, reactions become calm and measured. This emotional regulation is part of ihsan. Allah loves those who act with excellence, not chaos. Some people only change when boundaries are enforced. Endless tolerance teaches nothing. Respectful firmness invites reflection. Islam allows this firmness when harm persists. The goal is not control, but protection. Protection of the heart is sacred. Boundaries protect worship. A heart constantly wounded struggles to focus in salah and dua. When peace is restored, worship improves. This alone shows that boundaries support faith, not oppose it. The believer who sets boundaries learns to trust Allah more. They stop relying on people's approval and start relying on divine support. This reliance brings peace. Peace strengthens iman. Boundaries also prevent future regret. Many words spoken in emotional pain are avoided when limits are set early. Silence with boundaries is better than anger without them. Setting boundaries with wisdom reflects maturity in faith. It shows the believer understands Islam beyond surface level endurance. It shows depth, not defiance. In the end, setting boundaries is not disobedience. It is obedience to the balance. Allah commands kindness without self-destruction, patience without humiliation, and faith without fear.